everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Lauren Brockett, who is an HR consultant. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Look, the pleasure's all ours. I mean, having us, the amazing thought leaders like yourself on this platform to kind of just express their journey with our listeners, again, we greatly appreciate it. I mean, your time is very valuable. So I'm going to dive into our first question right here. Before we know about all this HR stuff that you got going on, just do us a big favor. Give us a little bit more of a background of your cultural background and where you grew up.
Absolutely. So I was born in London, England, and I'm a bit of a triple threat. I have multiple cultures. I'm multicultural, multiracial, and an immigrant. My mother's from India, and my father is Cuban and Jamaican,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's really shaped a lot of my experiences as a child into adulthood. So I like to say I was born in London, but really raised in Atlanta because in 1996 we transitioned here, and so
Oh,
that was a
during the
significant
Olympics.
part of my life. Yeah,
The 96
right.
was
Yeah,
Atlanta.
so the Olympics was earlier, and then I think we ended up coming right around that winter time.
Okay.
So yeah, it was an amazing time, for the country, also for Atlanta. So
I mean, the
yeah.
90s was popping.
Oh yeah. Oh
The
yeah.
90s, the 90s was a vibe, you know?
90s in Georgia, and I grew up in so we first moved to Savannah first, and then 3 years later we transitioned to Atlanta. But I'd never forget my fifth grade teacher would tell us all these stories of how she drove to Atlanta on the weekends. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I know what she was driving to Atlanta to do.
That ATL turn up is real.
That's it. She couldn't tell us, but
I
but
know,
no,
right?
it was
She couldn't break the news to you. Like, look, I go out there for peaches, but she was out there turning up.
that's right.
But that's, I mean, so you said Cuban, Indian, and Jamaican.
Yes.
That's a mixture right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so help me out. Like, which, well, I don't want to say which one you related to the most, but which one did you
Mhm.
see a lot more within the house?
I mean, my childhood, it was filled with um smells of curry, dance, and rum. I wasn't drinking
You
rum,
don't
but
know sin.
exactly. What you know. But
Let's go. That's crazy how you
yeah,
said all three. You said
yeah, yeah. I mean, but most the dominant culture was Caribbean. It was Jamaican.
mm,
I didn't know much about my mother's side of the family. It was quite controversial for a young Indian girl to marry a Jamaican man. So they had no context. They didn't meet me until I was about 2 years old. They and of course, once they met me, they were like, "Okay, yeah, we
she
think
cool.
we think we want to get to know our grandchild." So yeah, it was a bit controversial at that time in the
I
80s.
I I mean, yeah, yeah, because things are very conservative. I'm not saying it's
That's
not
right.
conservative now, but but I could see where that comes from. And obviously our parents, their thought process is a little bit different and stuff. Can you share a little bit more about like an immigrant story with us? Like what was growing up having that Indian culture, but then the
Yeah.
Caribbean, but then still being in like Atlanta. Like,
Yeah. I think I was very confused um, because my worldview was shaped by being able to get to know the other, whatever that was, right? It was comfortable for me to be able to try new foods or, listen to a different set of music. So I would have moments in Georgia where I'm talking to my teacher or I'm talking to classmates, and they just were so mesmerized by how I was saying what I was saying that they weren't paying attention to what I was saying. So it's being fetishized,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and I think that while some people like the attention, I think for me, I just got very angry and upset that I was being put on this, front stage of, wow, she's different. We want to hear her talk again. So I started actually becoming quite mute. I mean, I was bubbly and joyful and full of life in London, and then moving to America, I think I became very quiet, and it also delayed a little bit of my academic learning as
Okay.
well, because I'm
Okay.
thinking in British vocabulary and glossary terms, but then I'm reading and writing, out loud in class, trying to create a softer accent, that ended up becoming quite a kind of Americanized British. It was confusing. So
I
yeah.
can
And then
imagine. Yeah. Your
didn't
accent.
fit
Like.
in very well with, racial relations also was just difficult. It's like, okay, you look black, but you don't look black. But then I thought that, I would hear things like, oh, I thought that there were only white people in London. I'm very confused when you talk about black people in Europe,
Yeah.
so it was just a
Yeah.
lot of learning, but I had to be comfortable with telling my story over and over again.
And I'm glad you're saying that because a lot of our thought leaders that have come on have expressed the same thing. That there
Hmm.
was a level of frustration at one point when
Yeah.
you I remember one individual talked about like they were like they said something about people from Africa, like the stigma. They were like, oh, all of them, they don't have clothes, they live in huts or something. It was something so
Hmm.
over the top, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, no, that's not the case. And then you think only you're gonna hear that once in your life, right? And then all of a sudden you go to college and someone says it again. And you go to corporate America, someone says it, and they were just like, I have to constantly remind people that what they see on TV or National Geographic, or wherever they get their information from, is not where it's not
That's
the
right.
and it's crazy to know that that is the situation. And so when in that situation right there, you said that the accent you were talking about, like the glass, the language, in a sense. So there's obviously various all the various different cultures that you were talking about speak differently. Was there a way of was there something a uniform language within the household, or is it like you were going back and forth between different ones?
Mm. So my mother didn't know Hindi or Malayalam, the native language that our family spoke from South India. So all she knew was British. And I think she gravitated towards the Caribbean culture growing up as well. So it was a lot easier for my mom and dad to communicate with one another. She didn't speak patois. And also, my dad didn't speak patois either
Oh,
because, I mean, he
come
likes to say he does, but
Don't call him
we
out
make
now.
fun
Don't
of
call him
him.
out on the show. Don't call him out.
I love my daddy, but
I know. I'll play with you. I'll
he's a
play with you.
British man. He's a
Yeah.
British man, but he's, like we're all part of the African diaspora. So,
Yes. True
we
that.
have elements that we keep that we always hold, in our childhood. But now growing up in the household, it was pretty peaceful and okay. There's definitely layers of conservative, conversation around, okay, well, growing up, we didn't do this. We disciplined differently. We manage money differently. We think about relationships differently. Loyalty is different. All of those things you start to realize you default to what you grew up doing or seeing at home as an adult, and you don't even realize it.
Hmm.
So there were layers of that I think that they had to deal with and decide, okay, what's the new culture of our home for our children and in this new land that we're living in, where we're the first family members to move here. So
Yeah.
that was another layer of just shock.
Hmm. Now, when we talk about the work that you do, right? I know it's centered
Mhm.
around economic empowerment and access to opportunities. What inspired you to take on that path? Was it something in your childhood, college? Like, what was it that kicked in, and you were like, "This is it. This is what I want to do." And how
Yeah,
did your
that's
like
good.
personal experience shape that mission?
Yeah, I started realize. I mean, I love math growing up. I was really big into numbers. Um, And so I ended up taking the path of economic development. I was more focused on macroeconomics. And I'll never forget in my junior year at Emory, my economics professor used to work with Jimmy Carter. And he actually invited Jimmy Carter to come to our class. And I'll never forget this story he shared of going to Guinea and working with the scientists on and researchers on how to eradicate the guinea worm. And up until that point, I don't think I had really had a lot of touch with the developing nations, and I've traveled to Jamaica multiple times, but I think my family did a good job of just in some way masking me from true grit and hardship. Um, and so I was curious, obviously, with family members and my father talking about growing up in the streets of Kingston, or my grandfather talking about how he was homeless in Chennai and Kerala. But when heard Jimmy Carter's story, he shared walking alongside women and young boys who had guinea worm growing in their body. I'm thinking, a parasite growing in your body, and you can feel it. I mean, it was disgusting,
Mm,
but he was graphic with the story, and it shocked me to my core to know that there were people who were coping with their disease or their virus on a day and had almost taken it on as an identity. So this woman was holding this guinea worm that she was carrying around for years with her.
mm.
And when he met her, he's like, we need to get this out of your body. This is not part of you. Um, so the shock of it all really just had me thinking, maybe I need to dedicate my life to engaging in nonprofit management or working in community development, because I can't be going towards the economics path and becoming a you know member of maybe a think tank or being an investor, and then not really walking side by side with people who are at most
Mm.
in need. Um, and then
Well
it
said.
transitioned into anger. I remember watching at that time it was the 2000s, and there was this, I don't know if you remember, there was this big thing on the news around workers' rights and abuse. People being abused at Walmart, people being withheld from pay from certain factories, and it was this, Occupy Wall Street movement where we were just focused on how do we advocate for workers. And I'm thinking, well, there's something mustering on the inside of me that's growing more and more angry around seeing people abused at work. And I want to dedicate my life to helping stop that from happening. So who are the most vulnerable, who would get abused at work, and prevent them from being able to see their family? What are those things that are preventing them? And it was through uh, those emotions and frustrations that I started seeking answers. And I started really having a transformation spiritually as well. And I was able to encounter my creator, Jesus Christ in real life. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a whole new shock to the system for me as well. And so it really empowered me to seek answers to the frustrations I had, which launched me into economic empowerment and really working my way towards a life of service in some
Mm,
way,
mhm,
instead
mhm,
of
mhm.
a life of driven by consumerism and profit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to say it's only here in the United States, but that is a common denominator, right? Keep your head down, keep working, make a lot of money, pay your bills. But as you go through it, some individuals realize that like that's not life.
Yeah.
That's not everything to life, right? There's other things,
Mhm.
connections, authentic connections, can helping someone in need, right? And I feel like you've been through a couple of situations in your life where you and obviously hearing stories from your family members, you were like, I need to contribute. And
Yep.
I feel a lot of the issues that we have in our society currently today is people just not stepping up and making a change, right? It's always like, oh, this should change and this should change, but you got to be here to change. You got to speak up. You
Yeah.
got to say something. You have to vote. You got to do these certain things. But individuals like yourself, you took it upon yourself to be like, you know what? If I am going to be the advocate for change, I need to then do it myself. And
Yeah.
whoever's doing it with me comes along. So I could see where you're doing a phenomenal job in your profession and really making, because it's rooted in a purpose. It's not like, hey, look, I just want to make money. It's rooted in the
Yeah.
profession, and that's why you're very successful at what you do, from what I've seen and what I've read. Right. And I know you've worked with over 6,000 job seekers. 6,000 job seekers. I want our listeners to know that 6,000 over, not even six, over 6,000 job seekers, helping them to build their career, programming for underrepresented communities. What is some of the biggest barriers immigrants and refugees face when trying to enter into the workforce?
Yeah. So, I was telling you I finished Emory and had all those internships, and I connected with refugees by accident. I was unemployed, I thought I did everything right. I got good grades, finished undergrad and did economics, business development, thought, okay, great. I'm gonna make my parents proud. Typical immigrant story. And facing, going back to my parents' house and just searching online. I think I did every mistake you could think of. I was late to interviews.
Mm,
I I would apply to a job, forget to respond.
mm.
I um
You was doing it.
I was making all the mistakes, I remember just applying to jobs on Indeed and Craigslist and Career Builder. And I'm thinking, I did everything right. I got good grades. But it's not about the performance as much as it is the relationships that you build. So my colleagues or, my peers at Emory either had wealthy parents that were well connected, or they, from sophomore year, had gotten internships and built a career through their relationships with their managers at those internships before they graduated.
True.
That's the one of the biggest challenges I see with immigrants now, right? Is they focus on head down STEM, but it's about relationships. So I think one of the biggest barriers that I find is the networking piece for
Mm-hmm.
immigrants, and I'm telling my story, as I'm the first one to make the mistakes too.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowledge, being able to be knowledgeable about just cultural nuances in the workplace. There's a certain level of tact and greeting that you need to have. Um, and then I think what's unique about the community that I served for the 9 years that I was helping them write resumes was mobility. Atlanta specifically is just one of those fragmented cities where people live in different outskirts, and depending on where you live, sometimes will really be the launching pad for where you end up in your
Mm-hmm.
career. It's very interesting to see the wide income gap, and it's based on zip code. Um, so a lot of the families that I would work with while I was unemployed, I would write their resume and think, well, let me tell you what not to do, because these are the mistakes I've made.
Correct.
And so I'm gonna help you write your resume. Hopefully I'll find a job too. And little did I know that the nonprofit was looking at me as a candidate. So I got my first career job without knowing I was supposed to I was interviewing. So it just was
Mm-hmm.
a natural service. And so
Okay.
I
But
was the
that's how you got to
director
do.
of that.
Yeah.
That's right,
You gotta lead
exactly.
like that. If you start leading with the different thing, then it doesn't come to you like that. But
It
when you're
doesn't,
in this,
it's not authentic, right?
that
Yeah.
come on, we're gonna check that
Yeah,
box
so
right there.
that's how I ended up being the director of the Career Center for 9 years. They ended up, bringing me on and saying, "Oh yeah, you can create new things for these immigrants that you, with your HR knowledge, and your immigrant background. I mean, you're perfect for that. So yeah, that was my accidental career.
And you in that time frame, you mentioned a few things, which a lot of our thought leaders before had said stuff about it, like um, some of those barriers. And you mentioned about confidence. You mentioned about the language. These are things that like as immigrants, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna keep my head down because I can't make that connection because we don't speak the
Right.
same, we don't move the same, we don't think the same. So it already, you're right. You could have amazing performance. You could have came from the Caribbean with straight A's, but
Yep.
when you get here and now you have to speak and actually connect with people and build relationships in a matter of a couple of minutes too, sometimes because people write you off right away. They be like, "We're just not clicking. Next candidate, please." Right.
Hmm.
So it is a very hard thing for those first and second generation immigrants to say to themselves like, I'm nervous. I don't even know if I'm going to be accepted.
Yes.
That stuff kind of comes in, but then have people like yourself who are leading and saying, "Hey, look, it's okay. Let me help guide you. Let me help you with your resume so you can actually have a conversation when you sit down, you feel comfortable. Because this right here could start the conversation, but be prepared
Hmm.
for the next step." So,
Hmm.
kudos to you for getting into a position to help people feel more confident when doing certain things. Now, I know during a time frame, COVID-19, which is a very I want to say it could go both ways. Some people walked out of COVID-19 bottom of the barrel and probably still
Yeah.
way out, right? Other individuals like yourself did a lot of great things. And I think we definitely need to talk a little bit more about it because during that struggle for everyone, when the whole world, in a sense, was on a standstill, you were able to launch. Uh, you were able to launch your program, your company within a marginalized neighborhood during
Yes.
COVID-19. So talk to us a little bit more about that and experience and how you impacted that community.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, I in 2020, it was a wild year. It also happened to be the year that after 9 years of writing resumes, and I also worked with a lot, dozens of companies every week, local employers that were hungry to understand how to hire, hungry to understand how to build a workforce that was multicultural, multilingual. So I built a lot of great connections, but I got burned out in 2020. And so in January, I ended up sending in my resignation and didn't, I knew I was transitioning into more of a global company. And my thought was, I'm going to be able to work for this philanthropic organization that works in the refugee camps overseas. So they had me scheduled to go to Ghana and Sierra Leone, and I think Cote d'Ivoire, to be able to actually engage directly with refugees on the ground. Um, and part of that was their curiosity for learning from a lot of the village savings groups. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you're familiar around a lot of these groups, they do lending by borrowing money from one another. Some of the traditional groups may be called susus
Susus, yeah,
or
yeah, 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 yeah.
right, susus. In the Eritrean community, they call it ekub. So there's all these nicknames for the same concept of getting together with a circle of people you trust and swapping money so that you can pull the money at a certain time frame that you need it and then pull it back in to the circle. So it was exciting to be able to see, yeah, I've really worked my way out of a job because I wanted refugees that I was serving in Atlanta to take over. I was like, I've done what I can to build a legacy, but I want a leader to be able to come and create another generation of job assistants so that I can focus more on the global impact.
Mm-hmm.
So then COVID hit and it was devastating because the goal was for us to build circles of 20 to 30 people to meet in person, to get into a room together with a lockbox, and everybody would pull their money into one lockbox. Well, if you know anything about COVID, gathering was a no-no.
Yeah.
So we were not allowed to meet in person anymore. So I had to create other ways of people lending. So I partnered with some fintech partners in Silicon Valley to, I talked to PayPal and Google Pay and all of these different Google Wallet, all these companies to see how they could in some way create a platform for people to swap money digitally.
Mm,
Well, we tried it. I was able to build about 12 lending groups in Atlanta, and we focused on the most marginalized communities. So West Atlanta and South Side and the refugee community, of course, that I shared with them were the three pilots, and it was awesome. I mean, people were able to swap money both physically, with physical cash if the
yep,
group
yep.
wanted to. The VSLA model, Village Savings and Loan model, it charges people interest over time, so it's compounding. The savings are not just all the money in and all the money out, same. It was money in, everyone benefits from the increase, but you still get a circle of time where you can take the money out. So I think there were a lot of groups forming in that emergency time frame, and from what I know, some of the groups are still going now.
Shout out to that. Shout out to that. What was like one of the most challenging moments in your career, and like how did you navigate through it?
Yeah. So I left that organization to work in human resources for a company called the Center for Civic Innovation. And one of the hardest things after about 2 years of I started their HR department was leaving without another job lined up. I
Mm,
was I was doing great,
that's
was making great money.
woo.
And then that spirit on the inside is like, yeah, no, there's more. And I need you to take a break. And I'm speed. We're ready. let's let's build some savings. I'm not about that nonprofit life anymore. I'm an HR VP, ready to go.
Yeah,
And
I'm ready to cash in.
right. And but you gotta be obedient to that voice. And so I left without a job lined up. And I was really at the full mercy of God on what he wanted. And then it got even harder that same year because I ended up having three different job offers that ended up coming to me through friends, in my network. And they were six figures.
Mm,
And what I had to learn was instead of saying yes, and then I'll talk to God later, I had to ask God, I know you're teaching me a lesson right now. Is this something that you want me to pursue, or is this something you want me to put down? Because your will is better than mine. Because you got me this far. I don't know why you're asking me I don't know why you asked me to leave that other company, but just give me guidance. And he directed me in all three of those job offers to decline them. So I went from leaving a job, not having another one lined up, to having to actually say no to six figures three times. And it stripped me. It stripped me of everything in my identity. But I learned that your worth is not in what you do and how much you make. It's about being in full surrender and obedience to what your purpose is. And so I think the 2022 really made me. It really
mm,
made me.
mm.
Mhm.
You hit something real strong right there. You said three jobs. First and foremost, when you said you left the company, right? That's already a
Mhm.
hard decision, right? And you're doing pretty well. It's hard to leave, but a lot of people listening right now, any one of the listeners will be like, okay, I get it. There's a point in time where you want better for yourself.
Yeah.
Three opportunities, all at six figures, and you still said no.
Still said
That
no.
right there is where the listeners are going to be scratching in right now and being like,
Uh-huh.
that
What
that
was she thinking?
that's right. But you highlighted faith earlier in our conversation and being obedient and having something, a higher power, a higher influence in your life. And I feel like a lot of the listeners that have, I mean, not listeners, a lot of the thought leaders that have been on have had faith in something, right?
Mhm.
A higher belief in something to help guide them through this thing. It wasn't just like I'm just gonna keep my head down and keep moving like my grandparents have done before and my generations from back then. I'm also gonna have that on my back, but I'm also gonna go forward with faith guiding me as well too. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of combine the two to kind of help you navigate through stuff because three different jobs at all at six figures, and I know they were like thirsty. They were like, "Come on, pull up. You can start
Yeah.
tomorrow, get your desk and everything." And you're like, no, no. But look at you, happy. You're still happy, still
Mhm.
moving, still grooving, still got that smile on your face, and still helping your community. That just goes to show you there's more to life than just the six figures. And you could
That's
have
it.
six figures in so many different ways. Six figures doesn't mean just in your bank account. I need to have six figure smile. I need to have a six figure health. I need to have six figure family relations and stuff. Because you can have all that money and not have anything else. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you didn't fall victim to what society can sometimes puts in our forefront of our eyes and say this is what you should be focusing on. And I know
Mhm.
that there got down to writing a book as well too.
Mhm.
So you are just tapping in this whole journey. I'm like, okay, check box here, check box here, check box, and now we're talking about a book, and it was called Always Employed, and
Mhm.
you outlined 10 simple rules for job seekers. So listeners, I'm gonna remind you, you go pick this book up. We're gonna find out more about this book. But what is like one of the rules that you think immigrants and refugees should keep in mind when the number one rule when coming to like always being employed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate your kind words because it was it was hard. I'm not going to say it was easy to go through that. But you have to follow your purpose, right? And part of my purpose was finishing a book. And I'm thinking, oh, I can do that on the weekend. Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to dedicate my time? But I knew it had taken me 7 years to begin to write the pieces of the book.
Mm,
And so that gap year of being able to not have any job lined up allowed me to focus and be fully obedient. And so that's where Always Employed was birthed. And so I have been able to reflect on, the top 10 simple universal lessons that I've learned from working with people from over 175 countries. And through my human resources knowledge and my experiential knowledge, really on the ground with people that are in transition, I've been able to merge those worlds together to provide a lesson for people who are in transition and encouragement to know that, you're not alone, but there is some guidance that you'll need through this journey of self-discovery, discovering your skills, discovering, what you can and can't agree to when you're looking for a new opportunity, knowing that it's not all about what your parents told you should do or a straight linear career path, but your journey is really about what you want to do and what you're motivated to accomplish and serve for others. And
mm,
so I'm so grateful now because through that process, I mean now God told me to buy an LLC, and little did I know it was to build an HR consulting firm. So I do HR consulting, and the book is a great framework for my consulting practice for companies looking to hire immigrants and refugees and a multilingual, population of people, as well as career coaching, on an individualized level. So I still write resumes today, but I just do it virtually without needing to have a brick and mortar building.
mm,
And
mm,
so one of my favorite chapters in the book is if I had to pick, out of the 10, maybe one, I'd say chapter 10, and it's about healing from rejection. So the subtitle is Dare to Dream Again. And I'll never forget this immigrant he was from Ethiopia. And, he was elderly. He had gotten to a place where he was in epidemiology and public health in Ethiopia, making good money, working for the government. But because of political turmoil and the threat of death, he had to leave. And he brought his daughter here to America with him, and he would come to the job center, write resumes and every time he came, it was a different version of the resume. It was like he was a perfectionist to the T. And
Yeah.
he kept going to Emory's website because Emory had one of the best public health programs. But over time, I started to realize his confidence was starting to wean, and he was, showing up, and the volunteers like, all right, we're gonna do this. We're gonna write this resume today. We're gonna apply to this job. Let's do some interview prep if you need it. And I think he had gotten to that level of saying, how many times am I going to submit a job application and get that rejection letter? I'm
True.
overqualified for these jobs I'm applying for, and the chapter just talks about his story and the ability to heal through rejection because we actually had a connection to the epidemiology department at Emory. There was a
Hmm.
volunteer that ended up coming maybe a year later. And he was excited to be able to make some connecting points for him. But by the time he had shown up, he was so depleted that he was like, I'm at a point now where he said, if you haven't grown up, you haven't given up. Or if you haven't given up, you haven't grown up. I'm like, you're right there. If you just heal from the level of rejection that you've experienced, and I know there's layers to it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
and depending on the individual too.
that's it, but don't forfeit an opportunity, because of what I call this rite of passage that you need to go through from separating from your past to having this anticipatory socialization in HR is what we call it. Where you're excited for this new opportunity, and then you have to go through an initiation process to really learn about what you're going to be doing. And then, of course, there's a shock to your system of, oh, I'm in this new position, whether it's a new country or it's a new role in a company. And then there's integration. Are you able to integrate healthy
Yeah,
in a healthy way? And so some people don't make it through the rite of passage,
yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot.
but
But you
I
but you
just
got to
say
know the rite
hold
of
on.
passage. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That's
You got to
important
know
right
it.
there. You got to know it. If
Yeah.
you know how to, if you could forecast what's about to come your way, then you can navigate a little bit better, right? But again,
Yeah.
if you don't have the resources or the tools or this book, we're gonna highlight this book, right? Then you probably wouldn't know. So before we dive into the next question, just let the listeners know where we can find this book.
Yes. So if you go to www.alwaysemployed.org/book launch, you'll be able to get a copy.
Mm, okay, look at that, listeners. So tap in, make sure you pull up on that book. Always Employed. There's again a lot of great insight in that book, and you'll be able to level up, as I would say, right? Um, Something to dive into the last couple of questions right here, but you have an extensive experience in like HR operations, financial wellness. Like, what are some of the key lessons companies? Now we're talking about employees at one point. Let's talk about the companies now. Need to learn to create a truly inclusive workspace because that is something
Mhm.
that's in 2025. It's on the top of everyone's list in companies. An inclusive workspace. So how do we do that?
Oh man, I can speak so much to some of the mistakes I've seen, small startups all the way to, traditional bureaucratic companies that have been around for generations that make common mistakes in missing top talent. A lot of times you'll find um, people are overqualified for the role, but because they didn't make a good introduction, they miss the candidate.
That is
They
true.
miss that next great leader. Um, And then once you find a lead, once you find this top talent person, you say, yep, that's the person I want to bring on. Um, you've got to create an amazing experience for them to introduce them in to the company. There was a statistic that said that 82% um, was the number where a company could improve their employee retention if they just focused on onboarding. And so that's a big percentage,
Yeah,
that
that's
most,
massive.
yeah. And so, the fact that great onboarding can really improve employee retention by that much means that you have to refocus and rebuild the way that you are inviting people in. So I'm taking the same example that I give a job seeker, that rite of passage. So are you allowing the new employee to, properly orient into what your mission and vision is? Have they been able to fully separate from their past company, right? And been celebrated for what they did before?
Yeah.
Um, with that anticipation of being socialized in the company, um, are you as an employer, creating a realistic experience for the person to really understand what they're getting into? Um, Maybe in the introduction phase, you craft some opportunities for them to have a peer or a mentor, within the company to be able to build their acumen properly, right? Because not just a manual that you give them and on the first day and, all right, and most people here, they, drank by a fire hose of information and you just kind of hit the ground running. How often do we have to see those training mistakes time and time again? And then you realize throughout the journey of that person going through the 90 days, maybe it isn't due to their lack of skills. Maybe it's actually due to your inability to be able to invest in the onboarding and the training needed to bring them up to speed on what they need to be doing. And
Mm.
so we want to see people go through a rite of passage properly, but we also want the company to take ownership of creating that experience for them to have a foundation, right? For success in the company. So
Mm.
those are some things I would share, but so many lessons learned with working with companies in Atlanta.
What you said right there was very deep because I feel like I had this conversation recently with somebody in the same topic, right? And the topic, they asked me somewhat of the same type of question. I said we have to think about it like when we were back in our university. There was a freshman orientation, there was a freshman seminar, there was several different things for the freshman class, and even before orientation, right? There was so many different. I felt like a freshman for like a whole year,
Yeah.
right? I didn't feel like a freshman for the orientation day, and I was like, all right, I'm a freshman, and then now I'm a student now. I felt like
Mhm.
I was always reminded that I'm still a
Mhm.
freshman by all
Yeah.
these things, right? And then finally, when I get to a level like maybe like the second semester, that's when I was like, okay, I think I got
Yeah.
my foot in, right? But
Right.
they didn't let up on us. They kept reminding us, hey, look, there's a freshman seminar, there's a freshman this. You have or your orientation leader and your group is still going to be meeting with you 2 months just to kind of
Hmm.
check in. And I'm like,
Exactly.
wow,
They
this
follow up with you. How you doing? Yeah.
yeah. I felt like a star. I felt like I was and obviously I was an athlete as well too, but I felt like people were actually noticing me. Right? You get to corporate America, their onboarding is so quick because they're like, look, if you're not making money for me and we having too much
Right.
conversation, it ain't worth
ROI.
much talking going on. Look, we need to talk about money, right? And they lose track of what it really is, that authentic relationship that we was talking about earlier in our conversation. They lose track of that because they're like, it's a numbers game. I could get 10 people in and I could tell them something real quick and have y'all start running. Let's get the next 10. Keep it and like it's like an assembly line. But then years later, months later, people are unhappy. People want to leave. People are asking for
Yeah.
higher pay. You start to see all the struggles start popping out, but then you say, where did it start from?
Yes.
Where did it start? It started from the top, and
You
that's
set expectations, right?
you done broke it down right there. And I think I dived in a little bit more to kind of tap in and say, hey, look, I'm with you on that because
Yeah.
that's a very big topic right there. I,
Yeah.
I know. Another thing is the job lady nickname. Job lady nickname. Let's talk about that real quick. The job lady nickname speaks speaks high deeply, right? What is like the most fulfilling part of building career paths for those who need it the most? Miss Job Lady.
I think one of the most fulfilling things was being able to see people go from student to teacher.
Mm,
Um, I I will never forget this one gentleman from Iraq. Well, he was originally from Iraq. He had to leave Iraq because of the war in the early 2000s. And then he had to leave, he fled to Syria, and then Syria had their issues. He had to leave Syria. So he spent time in Turkey and brilliant guy. He was running a computer lab in Syria. And when I met him and invited him, he needed my help to write a resume for to get out of some warehousing job he was in Tucker, Georgia. And I ended up working with him and said, "Wait, you ran a computer lab? Do you realize I've got all these millions of wires around and this modem and router, and I don't know what I'm doing. You should come and help me." And so I ended up inviting him to be a part-time staff member and then full-time. And then I left, he stayed. And gosh, now he works for Cox Communications and is creating jobs for other people.
Mm,
And I just
mm.
think the ability for someone to be making $12 an hour in a warehouse job in their first 2, 3 years in America to 5 years down the line, learning things like coding and finishing your degree virtually while working, and then now making six figures at Cox Communications. You're creating generational wealth for your whole family. So now he's
Yes,
been able to
that's
sponsor other family members to come, and he's a leader at Cox. I mean, he's giving me advice on things that I need, now at this point. So I think knowing when you are coaching someone or teaching someone that they will eventually become your teacher one day, is something that is humbling, but also really important to know.
mhm. I like how you're tapping into the word mentorship right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing that I think a lot of our thought leaders, that if I had to put words into a bucket and pull them out,
Mm,
mentorship was probably one of the most common denominators across the board. They had
yeah.
mentioned, a lot of the thought leaders had mentioned like their parents and grandparents were like some of their first mentors. But how could you mentor someone if you haven't even really gone through it, right? So how is your mom and your dad, who doesn't understand how to fill out a FAFSA form, be a mentor
Mm,
if they haven't filled out a FAFSA form, right? So now you're in a
mhm.
situation where you said something very, which I commend you on. You really thrive on seeing someone become the student, become the teacher, right? That right there is truly what a mentor should be doing. You don't want to keep bringing the horse to the water. You know what I'm saying? Or the horse to that saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to, or teach a man how to fish, kind of thing, right? Or woman
Mm-hmm.
how to fish, right? it,
You
you
got it. Yeah.
listeners on here, right? So it is exactly that. But some mentors don't know that that's really what's supposed to be happening,
Right. Right.
right? Mr. Miyagi back in the Karate Kid back in the 80s, homie was like, look, wax on, wax off. But he wanted uh, Daniel to become a really good martial artist. Like that
Yeah.
right there is what it's about. So talk to me a little bit more about this mentorship and how it plays a major role in this immigrants and refugees journey.
Yeah. Um, I I I think mentorship is so important, and I grew up in a generation where you find your mentor, you meet with them, and you share your career goals and all that. And so I was constantly searching for a guide. All the time. I was constantly. I would even ask people, "Can you be my mentor?" Those people
Knocking on
never ended up
doors.
panning out to be the mentor.
Yeah, you're not gonna
It
knock, you're not
was
knocking doors.
no, yeah, it was the people who, were a lot older. It was actually a lot older men that I didn't have any kind of relational sexual connection to at all. They just saw potential in my growth. And um I, I think me being able to be vulnerable with them to say, here's what I'm doing well and here's what I don't know how to do. But I have a question. Can you answer my question? And I kept asking questions and then sharing when I made mistakes. And I think, the difference between a teacher and a going through, teaching or going through discipleship is just very different. Um, I met a lot of teachers in my life that could celebrate the milestones. Like, okay, we're gonna go from this to that and we're going to celebrate when you get to that, right? But being discipled, it was the ability to be able to be vulnerable with somebody who's stronger in an area that you're weaker. And then for them to not scold you for it, but to say, all right, I'm glad you admitted you made the mistake. How are we going to do it differently this time? And I'm still going to invest in you, not because of the mistake you're making now, but because I know you're going to make the right choice later. So I
Mm,
had a lot of investors within my vision that could understand why I was doing what I was doing, what my purpose is, and they were committed to me in the long term. And so they gave me upfront investments, on the vision that I had, and then I knew I was committed to seeing the return for them. And so those were my mentors, but I never called them mentors. They just ended up being that.
mm. And I think sometimes that's probably the best mentorships,
Yeah.
where it just you're not like saying, "Hey, look, could you sign a piece of paper? Say you're my mentor." Right? Your parents, were your mentors originally, right? So it's not like you're like, hey, look, mom, I need you to be my mentor. Sign this paper,
Right.
fill out these hours. It's the authentic relationship that we were just talking about. All throughout
Yeah.
our conversation, that is where true mentorships come in because then at that point, I have your best interest, you have my best interest. We're in conversation here. Like, you know what? I think personally you should look into another profession, right? And you just having those conversations sometimes are very hard to digest. But that again is a good mentor, someone who's not afraid to hide from those, vulnerable conversations. And it helps
Oh, yeah.
tremendously. And I know that a lot of our immigrants and refugees and first and second generation, in a sense, have a hard time sometimes navigating in life in general, right? With all the obstacles and struggles that they have already in front of them. So to find somebody that already has gone through it or has a better understanding of it, because not everyone can say that they made it to the other side, but at
Yeah.
least have an understanding. Hey, look, that FAFSA form, you might need to fill it out. Why? Because this is where you get financially. I'm not saying I'm the best person to fill it out, but I know the value in filling it out. Then at that
Yeah.
point, we try to find the answers, and we might find it together, right? So I thank you so much for just really highlighting the mentorship that you provide. I love the story that you said this person was someone you brought on. They still stay at the company, and now this person's helping you in your profession and what you do. So that's just beautiful. That story was beautiful to even hear. Like that's crazy. You go from $12 to now helping the person that helps you get to $12. Like, come on, let's just go. Let's clap it up right there. Come on. You better. You better.
And
Um,
let me add, I mean, my mentor told me some things that, not a lot of people could tell me. Like I remember we sat down for a business meeting with another partner and, he just observed how I pitched, right? And the person I was pitching to made me really angry about something. And I guess, it's just that culture, right? I just feisty, like I was mad and angry in the meeting, right? But I tried my best to give real clear and he told me later, he said, you have an anger issue. Me? But it's your mentors who can tell you the truth and don't run away from that. Lean into it. And so I had to get counseling to understand where is the anger coming from? What did I model? How can I shift that? So I'm a big advocate for yes, be led by the spirit, but also get the counseling you need.
but I'm keep in mind, as immigrants, first generation, and refugees, that we weren't taught that originally. It was like, don't even do that. Take some Tylenol, sleep it off. Right? You got a problem. Nothing was. You get some.
Drink some ginger tea. You'll be
Yeah,
all right.
some ginger tea for good. You know what I'm saying? That's all you need. You know what I'm saying? And that was the thought process. Like, oh, you had a bad day at work, here's some ginger tea. Mom, it's not going to help me. Drink the ginger tea, take 2 Tylenols, and go to bed, and you'll be fine in the morning. But to know that we're at a place where it's becoming a little bit more acceptable to have a therapist, to have a counselor, to have a mentor. Like I didn't really know about that until I got to college or like even like the end of high school when you had that guidance counselor who truly helped you. I was like, wait, hold up, there's someone who actually helps. I can go to your office. I could sit in your office and have a conversation with you, and you could help me, not just give a general statement to the public, like Paul Herman. This is what you should be doing. Apply to this college and this college. And then when I went to college, I was like, this feels good. But before, I thought I just had to do it on my own. But again, if you're not programmed and you're not looking and seeing all the signs that are around you, you wouldn't know that was a mentor or that was an example of a coach unless you join an athletic team and you're like, okay, now I can truly
Right.
see the mentorship because this person is truly helping me get from here to there. So it's just it's crazy. Some things are put right in front of us, but we just don't even know it's
Yeah, right.
right. And it's because we were taught not to do this. We were taught to do this. So if someone sat right next to you and who was going to give you that guidance, you're like, I can't talk to you. I gotta go. I gotta go.
Yeah.
I gotta go. My mom said no talk to strangers, but on top of no talking to strangers, I gotta go. And that's where we at. That's there's it is crazy. And something that also brings it up in regards to mentorship and um, a level of frustration I know individuals as a whole, right, our community because of society, is financial security. You
Mhm.
know, many immigrants struggle with balancing their career, their aspirations, and their financial security. You know, could you speak a little bit more on like any advice you would recommend to kind of like helping to blend these things or manage these things a little bit better?
Yeah, let me hear me say, I'm not telling people, I'm not telling the viewers to up and quit your job because you felt, that you needed to do it. You got to make sure that you are hearing from a higher power that that is exactly what you need to do and get confirmation. I'm all about, okay, you heard something, you're not sure, get wise counsel and ask for some signs. you know, ask for some confirmation before you make those decisions. Um, so if you're in a position where you have the means to be able to, leave and pivot and make a drastic change in alignment with your partner as well, because if you're living in the home with somebody else, your decisions impact that person too. So
That's
make
true.
sure that y'all are in alignment with the vision. If you're the head of the house, if you're a man, you have to be able to communicate. Here, baby, here's my vision, here's what I want to do. Here's why, I want you to pray with me about this, and we're going to go after this together. If there's any ways you can help me, let me know. But this is the decision I want to make, and I want to get clarity on this before I do it. If you're a wife or if you're a woman, okay, these are the things that I'm curious about. Let me get some wise connection with other women, other people in my career. Really, let me seek after this. So um feeling financial pressure is a real thing. Volunteerism is a privilege. To be able to try new things, a lot of white counterparts that we have they can take risks that a lot of immigrants may not feel that they can take. However, um, you're not alone, but it's about building that safety net around you that, will allow you to fall and then be able to connect back up.
Mm.
And I think the motivation behind it is always going to be important. So your aspirations for your career should not be driven by selfish ambition, but also what the more you grow, the more wealth you make. I believe that financial stability will come when your creator realizes that you're willing to give more away than you are to keep. So if you're willing to think about, all right, I want to make more by making this move because of my intention to serve more, to believe for bigger, because I want to have more faith to be able to step out to serve and make a greater impact, not necessarily, um, a bigger reputation. So that's the thing I would say, and you're going to be blessed for it. That's what I would say about
It's
financial stability. That's what I've learned, at least over the last few decades.
and when it's obviously when you're driving, you know, people start be, you know, rubberneckers, right? So when you see a lot of people in their financial gains because they're following what society has put out for them, they're like, guess I got to do that. But then you see somebody over here, and it's you know, people get so sidetracked. So financial security is definitely always going to be a topic at hand. There's no one way to get there, right? But I'm with you 100% on that. Like your maker, that individual up top that you believe in will provide you with those signs. And sometimes it might not look like a sign to you. It might be like, oh, why am I going to take this internship? But at this internship, someone's going to notice me who's going to give me this. But we don't know it. And if we knew what our maker had in store for us, we probably wouldn't be stressing. We would just be going through life like, all right, I know next week is coming, so I ain't even worry about my rent, you know?
Right.
But you got to have faith. You got to have faith that, like, you put me here for a reason. You're connecting me to these people. Why are you doing it? And sometimes, like you said in the beginning, you got to question, you got to ask questions. And sometimes you got to ask the questions to yourself. And once you ask those questions, you could sit back and be like, there's a reason why I'm in this room. I don't know why, but we're going to have to figure it out. But you can't figure it out by not making connections. You can't figure it out by not showing up. You can't figure it out by not being present. And the more present you are,
Yes.
things start to change a little bit more for you. But hey, you know what?
Mhm.
I realize that you're really good at writing resumes. I have a client of mine, and you're like, me? What?
Yeah. Hmm.
You think I'm the person to help you? Yeah. How much? And you're like, I don't even know what to charge
Yeah.
because I didn't even know you wanted me, right? And then it
Yeah.
just turns into you owning your own business,
Hmm.
right? So it is beautiful, and something I want to kind of let the listeners know, and I want you to kind of say it right now. You have a famous quote that you throw out there, right? And it's all about that purpose, right? So if you could dive it a little bit more, I don't want to spill the beans on the quote, but I could jump in and do it. But I really want you to say it and why it means so much to you, and like how did this come about?
Yeah. My quote is your purpose is defined by what you have overcome. And that means a lot to me because through the growing pains, and you referenced that in the beginning of our talk, it's through what you've grown through that you grow, right? And you can help other people. It's about vulnerability. It's about the ability to say, here's what I can say you should not do based on the mistakes I've made. Um, and so a lot of times people ask, what's my purpose in life? And a lot of it comes down to what do you know and what have you been through that is unique that many other people have not been through? And how do you combine that together? This is what I've studied, and this is the unique experience that no one can make up that I've been through. And I'm going to
Exactly.
put these together and I'm going to create a package that's going to serve somebody else. And so pay attention to what you're curious about, what you're curious to learn, because I think you're always a lifelong learner. And recognize that, your vulnerability and your unique value is going to come from your own experiences in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you never met a teacher who hasn't really gone through it, right? Otherwise, it's just inauthentic.
100%. 100%. And but those are the
So
teachers you connect with the most, the ones that have gone through it.
that's
That
it.
you remember
Exactly.
years later, like remember Mr. Hernandez, that guy
Yeah.
got me, because but again they went through it and they shared that,
Yeah.
right? And if we think back to our ancestors, like they would go out and come back to the community and say, hey, look, this is what happened. A couple
Yep.
miles away, this is going on. There's land here. Like this is what go like, society. If we really think back to that primitive time, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So if we go out and never come back and never help, then this area would never grow.
That's it.
And this was the area we came from. So there's another Paul, there's another Lauren in the next generation to come. If
Yep.
we go back, there would never be the next Paul, there would never be the next Lauren. So we
Mhm.
got to think how our ancestors did. Go out, hunt miles and miles away, come back and say, hey, look, we done found something.
Yep.
But it's a hard thing to think of because we're so programmed to be like, let me just worry about me.
Yeah.
Just worry about me. And
Yeah.
obviously you got social media, you got AI, you got all these other things in your life that really just distract you from like really thinking of where we came from.
Hmm.
Kings and queens.
Hmm.
Forget
Absolutely.
things. We forget these basic concepts:
Hmm.
giving, sharing, caring,
Hmm.
loving. These basic words that are throughout history have changed the trajectory of life.
Yes.
We're taking those words out of that book and putting money, putting selfish needs in front of us,
Hmm.
big houses, big cars. That's all. That's people processing now. They're like, that's all I know.
Yeah.
You stop for a second and really look at the book that was taken away from you at a very young age. That said, A is for Apple. You know, they said it clearly in the book. Sharing is
Hmm.
caring, right? We were
Hmm.
taught that at an early age.
Yeah.
Get to the dope. That doesn't even exist. Don't even say those words
Yeah.
in the office. We don't share. But
Yeah.
individuals like you have really, really made an impact on your community. And I want to thank you so much for just being present on the show today and really just, voicing a lot, a lot. You dropped a lot of gems and you have done a lot from helping other individuals to your book, to your company. Like you've just been checking off the boxes. So you definitely are aligning your purpose. You definitely are aligning in your faith. And whoever's leading you, trust when I say they're probably your biggest fan right now. And always. They've been like, yes, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, girl. And they looking back at everybody. I told you she was going to do it.
Right.
Y'all thought I was playing.
Eventually, she got some burns and bruises, but
Yeah,
she
she
made it
done
through.
figured it
Yeah,
out.
no.
You know what I'm saying?
You never arrive. I mean, I will tell you a good ending for this. I am making more than I ever would have imagined. So the faithfulness to be able to just be obedient is paid off already. And I'm like, oh, this is why you wanted me to push forward. And so there is a happy ending, but you have to go through that rite of passage to get through it. Yeah.
Mm. Listeners, you done heard it today. Lauren has dropped some gems, and I know that we should have her on a lot longer, but we can't take up her time like that. But Lauren, I just want to say thank you so much for just being present, being here today, and really again, just really being vulnerable on this platform. That is one of the biggest goals here at Zaka that we're really, really, really trying to push is really making sure individuals like yourself have a platform to share your story and inspire people around the world. So thank you so much for being present with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul, for having me and Zaka. So
No,
grateful for this platform
yes,
and the
yes,
ways
yes.
that you're blessing the diaspora.
That's right. We must bless everyone, but bless up. Yes, and I want to let the listeners know if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Lauren, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow us on our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. Love you guys.